What the are you doing here, little buddy? Have a rest. Just relax. Take a load off your feet.
Welcome to Antimatters.
A story that may bug you this morning.
Teens from Belgium were busted for trying to smuggle roughly
Thousands of live queen ants
Out of Kenya.
Officials in Kenya say smugglers used to focus on large animal species, but the new trend is to target lesser-known species.
Hello everyone. Up today, the most complete picture of the recent, inverted commas, ant gang bust in Kenya that I can scrape together. I got a bit fed up of reading half-baked, incomplete stories, favouring reactions over reality around this topic, so I decided to go and dive down the rabbit hole myself. By heck, it was a deep one though. This has also basically become a blog as well. It's too long for me to animate. To start with, we need to set the scene a little bit. This story revolves around mesocephalotes mostly, which are the biggest mesospecies in the world. They live in Eastern Africa and Kenya has a sizable population. Their diet is granivorous, meaning they eat mostly seeds, and in their native habitat they provide functions such as moving nutrients around. Despite their tendency to remove plant material from the ground, creating bare land, promoting land degradation, they generally promote good healthy grassland by holding onto and locking away nutrients in the form of seeds and waste that would otherwise be blown away, and aerating the soil, improving its ability to capture water and promoting plant growth. The court case you'll hear about today are from Kenya and all take place at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport Court in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. Any names will likely be mispronounced, my apologies. I've also shortened them a bit, some of them. Sources for information though, with all the full names, will be linked below in the description as well. When you hear about section 95, paragraph C, I'm talking about the Kenyan Wildlife and Conservation Act of 2013. This legislation applies to all the cases today and is aimed at the protection of animals and their habitats. In Kenya, their laws dictate that you cannot collect any wildlife at all without the correct permit. Section 95 specifically relates to offences relating to trophies and trophy dealings. This is how it reads. Any person who, without a permit or exemption granted under this Act in relation to a species not specified under 92, which are endangered animals, if anyone kills or injures, tortures or molests, or attempts to kill or injure any wildlife species, they can be told off. Paragraph B is deals in wildlife trophies. That's like, I don't know, skulls, I guess, elephant tusks maybe, things like that. Although the elephant tusks will go into a different category, probably section 92 or 3 and section 99 of this Act. Section C, which is what we're dealing with today, is deals in live wildlife species. In Kenya, if you don't have a permit, you're not allowed to deal in any wildlife at all. There's also a section D and E. D is in possession of a wildlife trophy or live wildlife species, or manufactures an item from a wildlife trophy. Anyone that commits any of these offences shall be liable on conviction to a fine of not less than 1 million shillings or a term of imprisonment of not less than 12 months, or both. The recommendation for prison sentence has been shortened since the Act was created. Previously, it had been imprisonment for a term of not less than 5 years. Paragraph C, though, about dealing with live animals fits this job really well. Anyway, this story actually starts back in 2023. I was unable to obtain a current court record for this case, which leads me to believe that it's still unresolved. Anyway, very little was reported about it, but 3 Kenyans were caught smuggling ants. This story is lifted directly from naturenews.africa. 3 Kenyans, including a young couple named Martin and Rose, as well as Eunice, an employee of the Postal Corporation, have been charged with attempting to illegally export harvester ants worth 300,000 shillings. That's about $2,500. The charges were brought against them for dealing with live wildlife species without obtaining the necessary permission from the Kenyan Wildlife Service, or KWS. The trio appeared before the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport Court and pleaded not guilty to 5 charges relating to their involvement in the incident. Of the three, Eunice faced an additional charge of facilitating the illegal export of ants. During the court proceedings, the prosecutor emphasised the urgency of prioritising the case as the lives of the ants presented as evidence were at stake. The government plans to hand over the ants to the National Kenyan Museum for research purposes though. The exact purpose behind the attempted exportation of the ants remains unclear at this time. These three people seem to be the first ant smugglers caught in Kenya. It may seem a bit unrelated to this case, but this seems to be the catalyst that led to more recent arrests. These Kenyan nationals also didn't have permits. This case got quietly swept under the rug before re-emerging last month, April 2025, with some extra details. The following story is taken directly from standardmedia.co.ke. Ant trade bust. Trio charged in illegal wildlife smuggling ring. On June the 13th, 2023, a peculiar package for export to France was found at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. We're going to call it the JKIA from now on. The package, initially labelled as wooden sculptures, or curios, whatever that is, turned out to be a rather intriguing consignment of ants, also known as saifu. This caught the attention of the Kenyan Wildlife Services and the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, or DCI. An investigation into the intended destination and source of the shipment revealed a similar consignment had been sent to China just 5 days earlier. The recipient of that shipment was Ri Zhangyong, and the sender was Peter Ngage. Meanwhile, another consignment was located at the Postal Corporation of Kenya, a multi-agency task force comprising of the KWS, Kenyan Wildlife Services, the DCI, Directorate of Criminal Investigations, and the NIS, no, I don't have a clue what that is, swiftly took action, apprehending Martin and his wife Rose. They also arrested Eunice, an employee of the Postal Corporation, and charged before JKIA magistrate Njeri Fuku with a multi-agency task force comprising of the KWS, the DCI, and the NIS, I'm not sure what that is, swiftly took action, apprehending Martin and his wife Rose, also Eunice, an employee of the Postal Corporation. They were charged before the JKIA magistrate Njeri Fuku with illegal wildlife trafficking. The trio faced allegations of trafficking mesocephalotes. Each pleaded not guilty, setting the stage for a courtroom showdown that would unravel layers of deception. The saga began with Elkanah Nakumicha, a canine handler at JKIA. In court, she described her role in deploying sniffer dogs to detect wildlife contraband in cargo. Alongside her routine security duties, on June the 12th, 2023, she was briefed about a multi-agency verification at the DHL warehouse, scheduled for the following day. While inspecting a parcel declared as plastic and wooden carvings, Elkanah's team struck gold, or rather ants. When we opened it, we found live ants concealed inside, he testified. Packed into syringes with cotton wool, the ants numbered in dozens in one consignment. Collected on June the 19th, they were handed over to KWS prosecutors, marking the first tangible evidence in this case. Days earlier, on June the 8th, KWS investigator Gladys had received a tip-off from David Sang, a canine master at JKIA. Sang reported intercepting a parcel declared as handicrafts that contained both dead and live ants. He delivered the insects to her office, seeking assistance in tracing the sender. The court learned that 56 syringes held the ants. Incriminating evidence. The investigation then landed with Corporal Anthony Mbao. On June the 21st, Anthony's 5-person team set out to locate the sender. Gladys told me the insects had been exported to France and were sourced from Eberu, Mbao testified. Upon arrival, they found no suspects, but on June the 23rd, informers led them to Martin at Eberu's trading centre, where he ran a shop. His name matched the package's sending details. Later, they arrested Rose at a nearby Kenyan station. Escorting the couple to their hardware shop, the team searched it in their presence, but found no incriminating evidence. However, at the Eberu home, the story changed. We found ants in containers inside a Duracoat tin, stuffed with cotton wool. And Bao said, in their bedroom, a carton held syringes, each containing 1 ant, water and cotton wool. 15 syringes contained dead ants, along with dried leaves. Another container with a red lid mirrored the setup: ants, cotton wool and water. Martin and Rose faced charges of dealing in mesocephalotes at JKIA airport without a permit, valued at 300,000 shillings, under the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act 2013, Section 95B. This targets trophy-related offences and carries severe penalties for unlicensed possession or trade. Both defendants denied the charges. Rose alone faces an additional charge of concealing prohibited goods under Section 200 of the East Africa Customs and Management Act 2004, which carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison or a fine of 50% of the goods value. Eunice is charged with facilitating the illegal export of 56 syringes of ants to China for financial gain, also under wildlife laws. She pleaded not guilty. All were released on a 50,000 shilling bail. It's been 2 years and it seems this case is awaiting judgment still. What it shows though is that the Kenyan authorities were aware of the trade of ants. This likely invited scrutiny and more attention. Despite the relatively low number of ants compared to our main story today, it was considered a crime nevertheless. The Kenyan Wildlife Services were alert and possibly awaiting a walk-in bookcase, something they could really throw the book at in style as an example. Let's skip to April the 5th, 2025. 4 males, 2 of Belgian nationality, 1 Kenyan and 1 Vietnamese were arrested and accused of charges relating to Section 95, paragraph C this time, of the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act. As mentioned, this is relating to dealing in live wildlife. This news was officially released on the Kenyan Wildlife Service's official Facebook and set the world on fire. At the guest house the Belgians were staying at, 5,000 ants are found, along with 400 more in the other 2 guys' location. The bulk of the ants seem to be mesocephalotes. A couple weeks later, on May the 7th, 2025, all 4 men were sentenced. I'm just going to read the court report. I will condense some bits, but keep the important stuff. This case starts with the introduction. Mesocephalotes. 2,244 tubes. Giant African harvester ants. Formicarium. Illegal wildlife trade. These are all terms that are now commonly associated in this matter. It is not lost in this court that this case has generated a lot of interest both locally and internationally. Lornoy David, or Lornoy from this point forward, and Sepe Lodgwick, or Sepe, are the accused persons. They are charged with dealing in wildlife species, contrary to Section 95C of the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act, laws of Kenya. The particulars of the offence are that on April the 5th, 2025, at around 10 o'clock, at Jane Guest House, Lakeview area in Nabieva, within Nakuru, they were found dealing in live wildlife species, namely garden ants. Approximately 5,000 queens packed in 2,244 tubes, which have a street value of 1 million shillings, without a permit. Lornoy and Sepe were arraigned in court to take plea on April 14th, 2025. They both pleaded guilty. They have at all times been represented by Miss Halima. The prosecution, led by Mr. Mulama, informed the court they were not ready with the facts. This was deferred to the following day, April the 15th, 2025. When the facts were presented, Lornoy and Sepe confirmed they were correct. Mr. Mulama informed the court that they were the first offenders, and then Mrs. Halima mitigated on their behalf. The court requested the probation office to prepare pre-sentence reports. These were presented in court on April 23rd, 2025, after which the court set today's date for sentencing. Additionally, the complainants, the Kenyan Wildlife Services, filed a victim impact statement for consideration by the court. It is not unusual for the courts to receive victim impact statements, but these are normally prepared by the probation office. KWS, being a state organ, took the unique step in presenting its own victim impact statement to add its voice, owing, as mentioned above, to the public interest generated by this case. The court accepted this report, and indeed the reports were shared with Ms. Halima, Defence Counsel. What follows next is the consideration of these two reports, as well as nuanced and germane factors that have been bearing on this case. So, law, Section 95C of the Wildlife Management and Conservation Act. Mr. Mulama informed the court that there were no previous criminal records for Lornoy or Sepe. He did point out that in preliminary investigations into Lornoy's phone, revealed that he was a member of a group known as Ant Gang. This is where the whole Ant Gang bollocks spouted from. Like, if you see all the headlines and it's like, Ant Gang busted, this is where they got the Ant Gang bit from. And yeah, it's just a bunch of rubbish. If you have a group though, and it's about ants, even if you're not doing anything like this, I guess, don't name it Ant Gang, otherwise it could be misinterpreted. But Ant Gang would be a fully acceptable name here, no one would bat an eyelid. Lornoy insisted that the court receives a report from the KWS as well, and hence the victim impact statement. Mrs. Halima presented mitigation for Lornoy and David jointly. She explained that they take full responsibility for their action. This is borne out by a letter dated April 17, 2024, from Scouts Saint-Pieter-Mole, a scout group where Lornoy and David are members. The letter was submitted together with a pre-sentence report. She stated that they are young and have the rest of their lives ahead of them. Miss Halima further stated that they reflected on their behaviour since their arrest on April 5, 2025. Additionally, the case has taken a toll on their families as well, with both mothers travelling from Belgium. Miss Halima told the court that Lornoy and Sepe collected the insects as a hobby and acted out of naivety. There is also a letter from Lornoy's grandfather sent to the probation office, which was also shared with the court. Lornoy added to the mitigation. He explained that he did not come to Kenya to break any laws, and that their actions were born out of stupidity. He said they were naive. Lornoy said he would like to go home to start his life. Sepe explained that the whole ordeal of being arrested and being in court had been hard for them and their families. The pre-sentence reports. The magistrate said, I have read the pre-sentence reports and I thank the respective probation officers that prepared them. The reports can be summarised as follows. I'll shorten it a bit because it's a lot of personal information. Lornoy is the firstborn son. He recently finished high school and has ambitions of studying tourism. His grandfather described him as a person with a good heart. Lornoy came to Kenya for a gap year before going on to higher education. According to the report, Lornoy has 10 colonies of ants at home in Belgium. He is an ant enthusiast and belongs to a Facebook group called Ants and Ant Keeping. Lornoy visited Kenya for the first time 5 years ago. Lornoy learned more about the season for collecting queen ants from 2 Kenyans, one of whom has an ongoing case relating to the transporting of ants. Lornoy said he bought 2,500 queens for $200 from local people. These were already packed, but he went to pack some more ants until the day he and Sepe were arrested. Lornoy is extremely remorseful about this offence. He deeply regrets his action. He did not know his actions were illegal and he prays for a lenient sentence. The probation officer recommends a lenient sentence and possibly a fine. Sepe went travelling after it was suggested by his mother that he travel the world to improve his mental health. She was certain that he committed the offence out of ignorance. She wants the court to give him a fine so that he can go back home to Belgium and go to university. The case has affected her emotionally, mentally and financially. His father states that Sepe has learned his lesson and he asked the court to consider his age. Sepe is enrolled in a diploma program to study economics combined with French, German and English as languages. Sepe said he came to Kenya to watch the safari rally, and this is his first visit. He and Lornoy travelled from Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to Nabieva using public transport. They arrived on March the 20th, 2025. Sepe has an interest in entomology, and through this he was able to connect with a local community in Nabieva and Gilgil. They showed him different species of insects, and he offered to buy them, but his intention was not to traffic them. Sepe is remorseful about the fact that he is in court for this offence. He also makes reference to one of the Kenyans in Lornoy's report who lived in Ukunda. He prays for leniency and states that he is a first offender. Sepe wants to go home and continue his life. Based on phone interviews, Sepe has strong community ties, and according to his friends, he has a good character. Victim Impact Statement. The magistrate said, "I have read the victim impact statements prepared by an officer from the KWS. It refers to increase in seizures of insects from 2019 without giving the data. How many seizures have occurred each year? What was the destination? What creature was being transported? Were there any prosecutions? Has KWS secured convictions? Are there efforts to sensitize the communities living where these creatures come from?" The statement states, oh my god, you can't say that. The statement states the seizures involved garden ants and praying mantis. The statement also makes reference to the fact that the live species in the case were packed in a way to ensure their survival for the next 2 months. In summary, the attraction to ants in this case, whose scientific name is Mesocephalotes, is that they are kept as exotic pets, highly prized for their unique behaviour, which according to pet owners is therapeutic to watch, used for research and educational purposes, a source of research due to their foraging strategies and social structure, useful for teaching ecology, the behaviour of ants, and the importance of ants in the ecosystem. And finally, they provide helpful insight into biodiversity and the ecosystem. The statement concludes that the specific use of Mesocephalotes is not well documented. According to the statement, an ant retails for between 60 and €100. They then go on to say an ant colony can have up to 10,000 ants, and in households they are kept in formicariums. I'm going to hope that they mean queen ants here, but it does sound a little bit like they think that each ant is worth 60 to €100, which is completely incorrect. Attached to the victim impact statement is the report from the National Museums of Kenya, entomologist and research scientist in the invertebrate zoology section of the National Museum of Kenya. In terms of negative effects of mass harvesting and transfer of ants, these include the extinction of the local species. The report from the National Museum of Kenya states that it is possible for Mesocephalotes and Mesoangularis to become extinct. This is because they have a very restricted distribution range and are only known in East Africa. The charge sheet states that it was only queen ants in the 2,244 test tubes. This begs the question, why harvest only queens? What role does she play? The role of the queen ant is explained in a paper titled Adaptability and Strategies of Ant Society, Analysis of Cooperation and Defense Behavior, presented at the BioWeb Conference 2024 and authored by Yijin Ji. The queen ant is the core of the colony, commonly the only fertile female and the heart of the superorganism, the mother of an entire ant society. The reproductive right of the queen ant is the supreme right in ant society. I don't have a clue what they're talking about here. The development of the queen ant begins with special ant eggs, hatching larvae that receive a richer supply of nutrients and hormones, and eventually they develop into a queen ant with reproductive organs and reproductive functions. Every year, a group of winged breeding ants are cultured in the nest. They leave the nest at a specific time to find male or female ants in different nests for mating. This process is called wedding flight or nuptial flight. In general, the marriage flight time of ants of the same species is in the same area is the same, ensuring that breeding ants of the same species from different nests can meet. The mating site of ants is generally fixed, somewhere in the sky I guess, the males first gather in the air, then the females come. And this mating cluster site may be used by ants for numerous years. Female ants generally mate with multiple males to ensure the genetic diversity of their offspring. After the wedding flights, the female ants will fall to the ground, remove their wings, and find a suitable place to nest and lay eggs. And feed the larvae, apparently. This process is full of crisis, and the success rate is extremely low, but the surviving queens will start a different round of ant life. Though not clearly stated in the victim impact statement, this explains how it was possible to collect so many ant queens at the same time. Lornoy in the pre-sentence report referred to the wedding flight as swarming. Once the queen is fertilised, she starts to lay eggs immediately, and hence why Lornoy and Sepe capitalised on this season in Nabieva. As the report from the National Museum of Kenya stated, mesocephalotes are found in a particular area. Miss Halima, their advocate in mitigation, informed the court that Lornoy and Sepe were only engaged in a hobby. It would have been classified as a hobby to collect perhaps 2 or 3 queen ants, or even, between them, 10 queen ants, 5 each as an insurance for them in case some of the ants die. But there is no justification for being found with 5,000 queen ants. None at all. This is beyond a hobby. Indeed, there is a biting shortage of mesocephalotes online, and if sold at an average price as posted online of €169, then the value of the 5,000 queen ants is in excess of €800,000 or $900,000. Indeed, if it happened to a larger species with 5,000 of a specific gender being taken away, it would be genocidal proportions. In the words of the report from the National Museum of Kenya, this would have led to the species being extinct. Yeah, it never said anything like that. But what drives this demand? Illegal wildlife trade and the change in wildlife trafficking trends. What drives the demand? The illegal wildlife trade of invertebrates is on the rise. It is also one of the largest underground markets, earning between 5.2 and 6.6 billion, only second after drugs, according to a write-up by Nabieva ES and Miftakhova EI from Tyumen State University. So I found the write-up and it never mentions anything like that. No numbers on total trade value as far as I can tell. It just talks about some unrelated drama-rich animal smuggling operations with sources like the Mirror newspaper. It's down below, it's nonsense, and it doesn't add anything to the case really, just like rubbish numbers. There are many examples of illegal... There are many examples of illegality. A casual search on the internet will reveal that online stores... A casual search on the internet will reveal that the online stores selling mesocephalotes have run out of stock. Due to the shortage, the price has gone up, with the lowest being sold for £99.99 for a single queen at Ants R Us. This isn't really how the ant world works. I guess you kind of know as well, as much as I do, that if there's not much supply of something, like, the price doesn't really go up because of that, it just stays high. Prices don't go up because there isn't any supply though, and it's all pretty fixed across the market. If any shop ever tried that, I'd never go back. The reason for their demand is stated elsewhere in these remarks under the title Victim Impact Statement. It is tempting to try and apply the same reasoning on the causes of poaching of big game such as elephants, rhinos and cheetahs to mesocephalotes or small invertebrates. However, the reasons do not apply. The hunting of elephant tusks is executed by sophisticated and seasoned poachers. They have developed stealth and skill in targeting their animals. It is normally a long chain from a poacher on the ground all the way to the end user, normally on a different continent. Most countries now recognise that it is illegal to deal in elephant tusks. Additionally, there is general awareness on the need to preserve elephants and other endangered species for generations to come. This reasoning does not apply to mesocephalotes. Lornoi and Sepe do not come across as typical poachers. By their own admission, they were ignorant that they were breaking the law. The level of sophistication in moving the insects, as described by the KWS, is through the post in concealed packages, as evidenced by the fact that they are on sale on different continents. There seems to be no ethical or moral questions raised about how they are sold or the process used to get them to their destination, in test tubes. It is simply just business. Let's not forget, everybody, that ants love test tubes. There is demand and supply. Those like Lornoi and Sepe who are able to capitalise on getting the ants make the money. Thus, there must be a new approach to addressing the issue of illegal wildlife trade that requires a multi-pronged approach with different stakeholders. It cannot simply be about law enforcement. That is only part. It is time to involve scientists, educators, ant enthusiasts, environmentalists, and those passionate about wildlife and conservation. Indeed, the list is endless, but most importantly, it is about gathering those interested in passing on to the next generation the best of what nature has to give. This includes, as the hymn writer wrote, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small. Kenya, and indeed Africa, is endowed with rich natural resources, most of which are not seen as valuable. It is no stretch of the imagination that in some households, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, it is surprising for many on the continent to note that ants can command such attention and value. Yet they form part of everyday life, especially for those who live in the countryside. But this script has been played out in centuries gone by. The script of Africa having resources that are plundered by the West and now the East. It is an uncomfortable subject, and to some, far-fetched to raise in a court of law, but it is a reality. Lornoi and Sepe, and those who are willing to pay the market rate for a single queen of mesocephalote species have seen and understand the value of what it is, a natural resource to Kenya. But is there a business case to be made? Is it possible to harness the entrepreneurial zeitgeist of Kenyans by providing a framework for those interested in handling different types of invertebrates? Can the National Museum of Kenya and Kenyan Wildlife Services have a section of Formicaria and have displays of invertebrates that are unique to Kenya and East Africa? I ask these questions not to provide any answers, but to generate debate and discussion around the issues of making a business case. Is it possible to set out guidelines on the exportation of not just mesocephalotes, because it is evident that they are already available online? The paper then goes on about the Nagoya Protocol. Gaps in the protection of mesocephalotes in the WCMA and the CITES Agreement. Gaps in the protection of mesocephalotes in the WCMA and the CITES sites. Where do we go from here? Now that it is known that mesocephalotes have such high demand and they are available in Kenya. One of the aspects that the victim impact statement is silent about is the fact that mesocephalotes are not captured in the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act. They are not listed in the 6th schedule as an endangered, vulnerable, or nearly threatened or protected species. Mesocephalotes is also not listed in any of the appendices in the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, the CITES. When it came time for sentencing, the magistrate said, "I find that Lornoi and Sepe pleaded guilty on the day of plea. They have accrued benefits to the court, and in particular saving judicial time, which is a scarce resource in this judiciary." Section 95C of the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act has a mandatory minimum fine for this offence. Lornoi and Sepe have shown remorse and plead with the court for the chance to put this case behind them and move on with their lives. Sentencing. In conclusion, Lornoi and Sepe are sentenced to pay a fine of 1 million shillings each. In default, they will serve 12 months in prison each. As for the ants, if there is no appeal lodged within 14 days, the item produced in Exhibit 1A are to be released to the National Museum of Kenya for them to do as they deem fit with. I believe the lawyer said they would be paying the fine and moving on with their lives. Hopefully their ant smuggling days are behind them. I'd say they got off very lightly. Except for the world media bandwagon. The 1 million shillings or $7,000-ish fine may seem low, but it is 3 times the average Kenyan's GDP, so it's a relatively hefty amount for over there. It's many years' work. So that's the 2 Belgium's court report. You now have enough evidence to make up your own mind. Personally, I think it's clear that there was no gang. The court never seemed to mention permits as a lawful way of collecting these ants too. Possibly it's completely blocked, in which case opening up permits would allow much more controlled, safe and equitable market in Kenya. What can we learn from this? It's illegal to collect ants in Kenya. You may, where available, require permits to capture and export ants from one place in the world to another, or even collect them. Read the law and examples of what's happened to previous people. The first story today, if they'd googled it, it does point towards the relevant act and all of the things you need to avoid. The media will always choose scandal over facts as well. If you are going to be naughty too, collect like 5 if you're going to be naughty. The judge said, although probably not as a recommendation, 2 or 3, and maybe even 5, could be considered a hobby. Also, the CITES stuff, which currently regulates only a small select number of insect species, such as butterflies and beetles, leaves many other invertebrates unprotected. I, for one, as an ant lover, would be over the moon to know that ants in trouble are protected in this way from international trade. I try not to be ignorant over where my ants are from, and the legality, but if there was a list of endangered species you shouldn't be able to get, I wouldn't get them. We aren't monster ant keepers anyway, like the newspapers have been making out we are. That really annoyed me, all the muck they were spreading though. Ants are one of the most fascinating and intelligent forms of life on this planet, and it's weird that people are getting goldfish and not ants in my opinion. They're the best dynamic pets ever. I've also thrown a respectable news report in below to show what it could have looked like if all of the bandwagoning hadn't been involved. Anyway, I'll leave you to make up your own mind of how guilty they are, and you can chuck all your views in there, but here's the evidence. I hope you enjoyed listening to me waffle along about this stuff for ages. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a fabulous week, until next time, may your ants live long and prosper, and bye!